Title: Inheritance of the Dead, Chapter 1, The Static Line. Elias Mercer's eyes opened to damp shadow and muted light. The ceiling above him was stained with splotches that looked like spreading mold or old blood, and for a moment he thought he was underwater. But there was no sound. None. Not the gurgle of pipes, not the creak of the building. He sat up slowly, breath shaky. He was on the floor of a narrow room with metallic walls. The air reeked faintly of rust and acid. He touched his head. His hair was matted with sweat and something else, something sticky. His fingers trembled. A faint warmth pulsed through the back of his neck. He felt for the small, familiar shape behind his ear, but there was nothing there, just a raw patch of skin. His hearing aid was gone. The silence was complete, not muffled, erased. Elias looked around. The room was bare aside from a scattered pile of papers and a cold steel table turned on its side. His hands instinctively brushed along the floor, finding a compass half buried beneath grime and a snapped leather strap. Its needle spun once, then stilled. He didn't remember how he got here. He didn't remember his name, not until he saw it etched in fading ink on the inside of his coat. E. Mercer. That sparked something deep inside him, a pressure, a memory out of reach. He stood, wincing. His knees protested, but he managed. His coat felt heavy, waterlogged. There were no windows, only a crooked door with dark smears trailing across it. His breath came in visible plumes, but he heard none of it. The cold bit at his fingers, yet the silence gnawed harder. As he reached for the door, something pulsed behind his eyes. A flash, white walls, a flickering light, the soundless image of a young girl turning to scream. Then darkness again. He blinked hard, shook it off, and pushed the door open. The hallway beyond was soaked and swollen as if it had been submerged and then abandoned. Soggy paper clung to the walls, layers of it molding together. Ink bled out into cloudy patterns. There were remnants of old signs here, warnings or directions he couldn't tell. The words were blurred, the edges melted into time. Elias stepped cautiously, every movement calculated. Even without sound, he felt his steps reverberate up his legs, sensed his footfalls with the precision of a man who had long relied on nonverbal navigation. His body remembered things he didn't. He moved past an open door that led into a small room filled with broken monitors and overturned chairs. Rust lined the floor like veins. At the end of the hallway, a collapsed ceiling revealed sky. Gray, cloudy, endless. Rain might have fallen recently, judging by the pooled water. A figure sat slumped against the wall beneath the break in the ceiling. Elias stopped. It didn't move. He approached slowly, hand hovering near a metal rod he'd retrieved from the ground. The closer he got, the more he saw. Skeletal hands curled into fists, dried blood blackened on the wall behind its head. A bullet hole clean through the temple, a final act. Elias looked away. He turned the corner and found a staircase leading down. The air grew colder the deeper he went, each step crackling slightly underfoot. At the bottom, a corridor stretched left and right. He chose left. The compass in his hand trembled. Its needle spun, hesitated, then fixed itself southeast. He followed. Elias walked the narrow corridor with deliberate steps. He could feel every breath against his chest, every tremor in the floor through the soles of his boots. The silence was unnatural, too clean, as though the world had forgotten how to make sound. He tried speaking again, just to test himself. His lips moved. His throat worked. He imagined the vibration of a word, maybe hello or anyone, but he heard nothing, not even the muffled echo of his own voice in his skull. There was only stillness. A wave of panic bubbled in his stomach. He knelt and pressed his hand to the concrete. He needed grounding, anything to reassure himself this wasn't death. His fingers found a crack in the floor, followed it like a lifeline. The silence screamed louder than any siren. He reached the end of the corridor and turned right, descending one more set of steps. The air shifted. Dampness thickened. He emerged into a wide room lined with benches and overturned lockers. A change room. The walls were painted gray, chipped and stained. A mirror hung crooked on the far side. He approached it. What stared back wasn't a stranger, but it wasn't him either. Pale, sunken eyes, days of beard, cracked lips. A diagonal scar trailed behind his left ear. He tilted his head and examined it with a finger. The skin was jagged, raw in places, like something had been ripped out. Then came the image again, burned behind his eyes. White walls. Someone screaming, their mouth open but voiceless. A man in a coat, his hands covered in charcoal and blood. He was mouthing something. Marrow. The word bounced through Elias's mind like a ghost trying to find a home. He didn't know the name. Or was it a place? A person? He staggered back, dizzy. A drop of water hit his face. He looked up. The ceiling was leaking. He backed toward the far door, hand on the compass. The needle twitched erratically, then fixed again. Southeast. He moved. The shadows in the mirror shifted behind him. The door led into a tunnel, wide, cracked, running straight for hundreds of feet. The walls were tagged with graffiti, jagged symbols, crude stick figures, names. He slowed, trailing a finger along them as he passed. Some were illegible. Others struck odd notes. Do not run. Frozen ones listen. The silence inside the tunnel had depth, like being swallowed. Every few steps he stopped to feel his own breathing, needing that tactile connection. Then a soundless flash hit him, a memory without volume. He stood in a stairwell. A child screamed. A man in a white coat closed a heavy door, sealing off a room filled with smoke. A name was shouted. But Elias didn't hear it. He only felt the air collapse in his lungs. He stumbled forward, fingers splayed on the tunnel wall to steady himself. The ground here was littered with debris, splintered furniture, a shattered camera, and a trail of dried footprints. The tunnel turned and opened to daylight. Elias shielded his eyes as he stepped into a wide street cloaked in fog. The buildings were old, some brick, some concrete. Most had their windows broken or boarded shut. One store had mannequins still in the display, dressed in tattered formal wear. Their heads were turned to face the street. He walked quickly past them. To his left, a rusted water tower stood against the fog, painted in red letters. Help her. Beneath that, someone had spray-painted a circle with 3 vertical lines slashed through it. His compass vibrated faintly in his hand. The needle pointed down a side street. As he turned to follow, something ahead stopped him cold. Figures, not walking, not moving, standing, motionless. 3 of them spaced evenly down the street as if placed there deliberately. Their clothes hung loose, their heads tilted slightly. They didn't twitch, didn't turn, didn't breathe, but they were watching. Elias stood frozen, breath locked inside his chest. The 3 figures ahead didn't move. Their heads hung at slight angles as if curious or broken. One wore what might have been a security jacket. Another's arms dangled unnaturally long, fingers nearly brushing the concrete. Their shadows stretched long beneath the fog-drenched streetlights. He crouched beside a wrecked mailbox, hand gripping the compass. The needle twitched again, fluttering erratically before slowly fixing southeast. That was where the figure stood, the direction he had to go. He scanned the area. No doors near, no open windows, just ruins and the dead. He stepped out, careful, quiet, each movement measured like a ballet performed on glass. He passed the first figure. Its feet were bare, nails split, skin discolored. It didn't react. His heart thudded, not in his ears, but in his bones. The second figure's jaw was open too wide. The skin around its mouth had split. One of its eyes was missing. Its clothes were soaked and hung in ribbons. He kept walking. The third turned its head, just barely, toward him. He stopped cold. Its eyes were white, mouth slack. It didn't lunge, didn't moan. It just stared. Then it tilted its head back as though smelling something. Elias ran. The world remained silent as his boots slammed the pavement. He couldn't hear the thud, but he felt each one jarring up his legs. The buildings blurred past. A hollow wind whipped unseen through alleys. He turned at random, trusting instinct or fear. Behind him, nothing chased. He didn't look back. He ducked through an open doorway, yanked it closed, and collapsed against the wall, breathing like a man who hadn't in days. Sweat poured down his temples. He scanned the room. Abandoned, shelves overturned, posters curled on the walls, a calendar from a year he didn't remember. He stood slowly, looked around. A map. It hung on the back wall, dirtied, torn but legible. The town, roads marked in yellow, certain locations crossed out with thick black X's. One place circled in red. Red Tooth. His stomach knotted. That name. It meant something, or it should have. His head throbbed like something inside wanted out. He reached for his notebook, sketched the layout, memorized the roads. His hand was steady, his mind less so. Another memory flashed, a little girl's hand in his, running, flashing lights, a door closing, the girl shouting, lips moving, but Elias heard nothing. His hands trembled. He gripped the notebook harder, trying to steady them. The name Red Tooth burned into the page. Something was hidden there, or someone. He looked back at the map on the wall. Underneath it was a note, pinned with a rusted thumbtack. Don't trust the ones who pause. Elias stared at the message, then remembered the third figure on the street, the one that had turned its head but hadn't followed. Paused. What did it mean? Were they learning or watching? He tore the note from the wall and folded it into his pocket. His mind raced, threading questions he didn't want answers to. He left the building, stepping into denser fog. The compass needle was steady again, pulling him toward the heart of this decaying town. The streets narrowed as he walked, buildings leaning inward like crooked teeth. A church steeple loomed in the distance, its bell long missing. Vines climbed the brick walls. He paused at an intersection. Another figure stood ahead, still, like the others. This one wore a parka, blood down the front. Its hands were raised halfway, fingers bent as if mid-movement. It didn't sway, didn't breathe. Elias circled wide, stepping into an alley. A name whispered behind his eyes. Lauren. He stopped, heart pounding. He didn't know that name, but it cut through the fog like a blade. Elias stumbled through the alley, heart hammering, though he couldn't hear its beat. The name Lauren echoed in his mind, disconnected from any face or voice, a ghost of memory that brought no comfort, only dread. The buildings here were tighter, leaning in on him like witnesses to his confusion. Each cracked window felt like an eye, and every door he passed seemed to hold its breath. The compass tugged in his hand, its needle a quiet guide. He turned a corner and emerged into a courtyard littered with broken furniture and empty crates. A fire pit sat in the middle, its ashes long dead. On the wall across the yard, painted in broad strokes of red, were words he couldn't miss. It listens. Stay still. He didn't know what it meant, but the urgency in the lettering was unmistakable. He moved along the edge of the courtyard, trying not to disturb anything. He stepped over a broken chair and froze, foot just inches from a set of small muddy handprints, too small for an adult, fresh. Someone had been here, maybe still was. He crouched, examined the prints. They led to a stairwell descending into darkness. He hesitated. The air down there smelled different. Earthy, wet, not rot. Not yet. Drawing his metal rod, he began the descent 1 foot at a time. The stair creaked. He felt it, but nothing else stirred. The temperature dropped quickly. He reached the bottom and entered a sub-basement filled with decaying shelves and water-stained documents. A figure moved in the back corner. He flattened himself against the wall, rod raised. The shape shuffled, but not with hunger or rage. It was slow, methodical, almost searching. A flashlight flickered on. A girl, maybe 13. Dirt-streaked face. She saw Elias and immediately raised a finger to her lips. He didn't hear her shush, but he understood. She pointed behind him. He turned. A second figure stood at the stairwell, motionless, face gaunt, blood crusted along its jawline. Its head slowly turned toward them, but its body remained still. Then, suddenly, it dropped into a crouch. Unnatural. Jerked, twitched, but it didn't lunge. Elias felt something ancient shift in the silence. The girl moved first, slipping past him, pulling his sleeve. He followed, and they ran down a side passage as quiet as breath. They emerged into another corridor that led to a boiler room, the machinery long dead. She pulled a crate aside, revealing a tunnel cut into the wall, clearly hand-dug. She motioned for him to follow. He hesitated just a second, then dropped in after her. The tunnel stretched far, lit only by dim emergency lights wired to some unknown source. The girl moved like she'd lived here forever, confident, quiet. Elias kept up, glancing behind them every few steps. They emerged in a hidden room, a makeshift bunker, blankets, cans, a radio with wires pulled from it. The girl grabbed a notebook and wrote something, then handed it to him. Don't speak. They echo what they hear. If you talk, they remember your sound. His blood chilled. He nodded, throat tight. She stared at him for a moment, then scribbled again. You don't hear them. That's why you're still alive. The realization settled on him like fresh snow. She opened a locker and pulled out a map. On it, Red Tooth was marked with a symbol he hadn't seen before, a spiral. She pointed to it, then back to him. Then another word she wrote. Why are you going there? He didn't have an answer, only a gut feeling that it mattered, that it held something for him. A noise behind them, a click, mechanical. Then nothing. The girl froze. She blew out the small candle they had lit. They sat in perfect darkness. The clicking came again, closer. They didn't move. A scraping sound, like bone against concrete, drew nearer to the tunnel's mouth. Elias closed his eyes and tried to remember the girl from his memory. Was it this one? Was Loren even real? The creature outside didn't enter, Minutes passed. Finally, she relit the candle. Elias's hand shook as he pulled out his compass. It still pointed southeast. They had to go. She nodded. She would come with him. No names were exchanged. They climbed out, back into the tunnel. They moved through the underbelly of the town. Once they passed another frozen one, its mouth open as though screaming without air. It didn't move as they passed, didn't blink. But Elias felt its eyes follow them. They reached a staircase at the edge of a sewer outflow. Graffiti on the wall said, "Pause equals predator." The girl touched his arm. She looked scared for the first time. Elias took the lead. They ascended. The door at the top was locked, but someone had jammed a crowbar through the frame. He forced it open. Sunlight. They stepped into a garden overgrown with thorns. A sign read, "Saint, Lauren's Orphan Home." He stopped. Lauren. The girl tugged his sleeve, her face pale. There were bodies here, lined neatly along the grass, covered in sheets. Except one. Chapter 2. The paper-crowned Juniper Wells sat cross-legged on the cold tile floor of what used to be a preschool cafeteria, wearing a crown she'd fashioned from aluminum foil and crayon-scribbled worksheets. The fluorescent lights above her no longer worked, but she pretended they did. Pretending was important. Pretending kept the screams away. She tilted her head toward the corner of the room where an overturned plastic chair sat draped with a sheet like a ghost. "You're being rude again, Felix," she said gently. "We do not interrupt story time, especially not when the Queen is thinking." The chair, of course, didn't respond. But Juniper smiled anyway, nodding as if it had apologized. She ran her fingers through her uneven hair, hacked short on one side, matted on the other, and traced a shape in the dust beside her. A spiral, the same symbol she'd drawn on the hallway walls leading into her domain. The Queen had rules, and rules meant order, and order meant safety. Outside, the world was chaos, biting, moaning, hungry, but in here, the kingdom obeyed. The dolls guarded the stairwells. The cardboard guards at the front door stood tall, their eyes painted red so they'd see danger coming. She'd painted them with nail polish she took from the nurse's station in the facility before the world collapsed. She remembered screaming when they touched her back then. Now, no one touched her. Now, she was clean. She pulled a broken toy recorder from her bag and spoke into it like a radio. "This is Crown 1 to Candlelight. No breaches in the East Wing. The cafeteria is secure. Send in the blueberries. Over?" She laughed to herself. It came out sharp, too loud. Even she flinched. Her face turned suddenly grave. She turned toward the back of the room. 3 stuffed animals sat propped against a metal shelf, each with buttons for eyes and duct-tape mouths. She stared at them, eyes narrowing. "Which one of you moved?" Silence. Always silence. Juniper rose to her feet, slowly. Her fingers twitched. She paced in a circle, muttering a rhyme under her breath. "If they twitch and if they breathe, they're not yours, and they don't leave." Her foot caught on a crayon box. She paused, looked up. Someone was watching her. She could feel it. Juniper darted to the window and crouched low, peeking through a sliver in the taped-up glass. Her eyes scanned the playground outside, rusted swing sets, a teeter-totter frozen in decay, and beyond it, the trees. The trees always whispered. Not to her, not exactly. But they sounded like things that used to be human. No one stood outside, not today. But someone had looked. She felt it in her spine. "You can't see the queen if you don't knock," she whispered. She crawled across the tile on all fours and reached her throne, a faded plastic kiddie chair with glitter stars stuck on it. Sitting down, she picked up her scepter, an old conductor's baton taped to a toothbrush. She tapped it twice on the floor. Court is now in session. The case of Juniper versus the Sky-Eyed Watchers resumes. She looked left, where a doll with burned hair sat on a pile of faded lunch trays. Its smile was crooked. Its eyes were glass. "Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?" The doll didn't answer. Juniper squinted at it, then leaned forward. "Lying is punishable by exile to the room with the teeth." She smiled sweetly and leaned back, humming softly. "The clouds are low, the wind is thin. If you invite the dark, it will come in." Her humming stopped. Her head turned. There was a sound again. Except not really a sound. A pressure. Behind her. She stood slowly, dropped the baton. Her hand drifted toward a pair of safety scissors strapped to her leg with a torn rubber band. She turned in place, one heel scraping gently, her eyes fixed on the hallway. Someone had entered her kingdom. Juniper slinked toward the hallway like a cat, spine curved, breath shallow. Her fingers hovered over the scissors, eyes wild. She pressed her back to the wall beside the open door leading out of the cafeteria. She waited. She counted backwards from 10. On 8, she mouthed, "Ready." On 5, she smiled. At 0, she burst out into the hall. Nothing. Just dust motes hanging like spirits in the beams of light cutting through cracked ceiling tiles. Her painted arrows were still there on the walls, pointing toward safe zones and rain rooms and no loud thoughts. No footprints in the dust. She frowned. Then she grinned. "Ah, tricksy little spies. Invisible ones like butterflies with razors." She twirled in place, spinning once, twice. "You can run, but I'm already behind you because I invented running." She stopped suddenly, listening, not with her ears, but with the quiet part of her brain that still tried to function. Her smile faded. Something had changed. The door to room 19, her no-go zone, was slightly ajar. Juniper's eyes went flat. "No one goes in there," she muttered. "Not even me. Especially not me." But the door was open now. She stepped toward it, each movement slow, reverent, like walking to a grave. She placed her hand on the doorknob. Cold. Behind her, one of the hallway lights flickered. She didn't flinch. She turned the knob. Room 19 smelled of iodine and something long dead. Desks were overturned, smeared with old red stains. Someone had written a looping message across all 4 walls in what looked like dried ink or blood. "Touch nothing. They remember." Juniper stepped inside and immediately began whispering a nursery rhyme she didn't know the origin of. 13 eyes and 7 skins. If it calls, don't let it in. The air in room 19 was wrong, too still, too thick, like sound had once existed here, but died, choking on itself. She picked her way through the overturned desks and knelt beside a drawing on the far wall. Charcoal, crude, a figure with long arms and no mouth. She blinked. The image pulsed. She stood quickly. Behind her, a cabinet creaked open an inch. Her breath caught. She turned slowly. The cabinet was empty, but her reflection in the glass door didn't match her movement. It was slower, lagging. Then it smiled when she wasn't. She screamed just once, short, sharp, a child's scream. She spun out of the room, slammed the door behind her, and leaned against it, eyes wide. She drew a line across it with chalk, a warning, a ward. "Room 19 is cursed again," she whispered. "Felix gets no cookies tonight." Juniper stumbled back to the cafeteria, barefoot now, one of her shoes lost in the chaos. Her foil crown hung sideways. She dropped to her knees in front of her dolls and stared at them for a full minute. Then quietly, "Did you see it?" None of them answered. Of course not. But still. Room 19 is broken again. The quiet in there isn't the nice kind. It's the listen kind. She looked at the spiral she'd drawn earlier. It seemed deeper now, like it wasn't chalk at all, but a tunnel. She traced it with one finger, round and round. Then she stopped. "Someone's coming," she whispered. "Not the way they come. Different." She stood and walked to the window. Fog had begun to roll through the playground, slow, thick, and through the white, a shape, still, silent, watching. Juniper didn't blink as the figure in the fog stayed still. Her forehead pressed to the window's edge, leaving a smudge. The shape had no features from this distance, just height, stillness, a presence. She smiled wide and sharp. "Oh, you're new?" she said softly. "You haven't heard the rules yet." She danced backward on her toes, arms out, spinning through the empty room. Her laughter echoed off the walls, though she didn't hear it. She imagined it. In her mind, it bounced like bells, a symphony of survival. Then she stopped dead. "Wait, did I invite you?" She snapped her fingers at the air 3 times, her signal. No one appeared. The figure hadn't moved. She reached for a box of chalk and began scrawling symbols across the tiles, circles within triangles, eyes inside spirals. Every motion was quick, practiced. She moved like a ritualist, like a priestess in a collapsing church. Her lips moved. "Let no shadow stretch, let no hunger think. I mark this floor in holy ink." Her gaze flicked up again. The shape had vanished. She blinked once, twice, then turned slowly toward the front door. She could feel it now. It had crossed her line. She dropped the chalk, moved toward the hallway. Every part of her screamed, "Stay! Hide! Shriek!" But something deeper, older, told her to go forward. She passed the soldiers she had built, mop handles dressed in coats, eyes drawn with mascara. They looked brave in the half-light. She saluted them. "You've done your best." Her bare feet padded across the cold tiles, down the hall, past room 19, toward the entrance. Each step became heavier, like gravity thickened here, like the world knew what waited and wanted her to stop. She didn't. At the front door, the locks hung broken. She hadn't heard them break. She hadn't heard anything in weeks. Not really. She reached for the handle. It turned on its own. She stepped back, heart suddenly real again, pounding in her throat. The door creaked open an inch. Fog spilled in, curling along the floor like fingers. No one stood there, but something watched from behind the white. Juniper dropped to all fours, crawling toward the coat closet near the front hall. She slipped inside and pulled the door shut behind her. Slivers of light filtered through the cracked wood. She breathed slowly, carefully. She whispered to herself, not words, not yet, just sounds she could trust. Then she did speak, quiet, measured, a reminder. "You are the queen of the quiet. You write the rules. You make the lines. You tell the stories." Something moved outside the closet. A footstep, felt, not heard. She covered her mouth with one hand. The figure passed the door. A shape, not rot-smeared like the others, not twitching or hunched, just still, straight-backed. Juniper closed her eyes and imagined herself elsewhere, in a memory, a hospital, her brother giggling under a sheet, her laughing too, then screaming when she couldn't find him. The nurse's voice, the straps, the pills, gone now. Her eyes opened. She was still in the closet, still alive, but not alone. She waited until the pressure left the air, until the hallway was just a hallway again. The presence was gone. She stepped out shivering but stood tall. Back in her cafeteria throne room, the dolls were toppled, the crayons scattered, the chalk lines smudged. Someone had entered. She reset everything in silence. Dignity. Then she spoke aloud. "To the trespasser, you've been seen. You have until sundown to present yourself with an offering, otherwise the sky eyes will open." She didn't know what the sky eyes were, but they sounded useful. She climbed onto a table, drew a large spiral with red paint, and stood in the middle of it. "Let this be the day they write about," she whispered, "the day the Queen of the Quiet met her shadow." A voice whispered in her head, her brother's voice, though she knew it wasn't real. "He's not like the others." She blinked. She hadn't told anyone he was a he. Night came fast, and with it, stillness. Juniper set candles along the walls and lit them with the last of her matches. The cafeteria glowed with a soft yellow haze. Shadows danced like old ghosts, familiar but untrusted. She moved between them, humming, the same rhyme she always hummed. Then she crouched in the far corner of the room, arms wrapped around her knees. She stared at the front door, waiting. "Come on, then," she whispered. "Let's see what you really are." Nothing moved. She waited. Then, a shape, outside. No twitch, no sway. Still, watching. And this time, Juniper didn't feel afraid. She felt curious. Her finger traced a message in dust. "If you're real, knock once." Juniper didn't breathe. Her finger hovered above the words she had written in the dust. "If you're real, knock once." The figure outside remained perfectly still. She leaned forward. Her foil crown slid slightly down her temple. Then a sound not heard but felt. A vibration through the door. The tiniest knock, just once. She blinked slowly. "Well, shit," she whispered. She stood, brushed her hands on her pants, and turned to the dolls. "You heard that, right?" Then laughed. "No, you didn't. I felt it. Felt it in my toes." The knock hadn't been angry. Not the way the others banged and clawed and moaned. It had been polite, almost questioning, like asking for a seat at the table. Juniper didn't open the door. She left the cafeteria and crept back to her closet of traps. From beneath a shelf, she pulled out her offering bag, things she'd saved, trinkets, bits of shine, her barter collection. She chose a locket, a baby sock, and a plastic butterfly ring. She returned to the door, cracked it open. The figure was still there, a man, pale, dirty, eyes sunken, but he didn't twitch, didn't drool. He just watched her like she was a puzzle. She held up the locket and the ring. He didn't move. She tossed them toward him. They landed in the dirt. He looked down, then back at her. No words. She shut the door again, fast but not slammed, then collapsed against it, laughing softly. Morning came gray. The candles burned low, melted into pools across the floor. Juniper rolled off her throne and opened the door again. The locket was gone, the ring too. But in their place was a folded page, slightly torn, weighted by a stone. She snatched it up and stepped back inside before anything could follow her. She unfolded the paper. Inside was a single line, drawn in pencil. I don't talk. I listen. You're not crazy. Juniper stared at the words, mouth opened slightly. Her breath fogged the paper. She reread it, again and again. The final time, she laughed so hard she cried. Not crazy, she repeated. He listens. Oh, sweetheart, that makes you more dangerous than I am. She pinned the note above the dolls' heads like a banner. New prince has entered the kingdom, she announced. Then she painted a spiral on the floor in front of the throne and knelt in it. The world was shifting. Something real was coming. She barely slept. Every hour or so she would check the window, then the hallway, then room 19, always in that order, 3 points of the triangle. She whispered this to herself as she patrolled. Window, hallway, room of teeth, triangle protects the queen. The whispers in her head had grown quieter, like they too were waiting, like something bigger had taken notice. That day, she marked every doorway with salt packets she had stolen from the facility cafeteria months ago. She lined her bed with pencil shavings and citrus peels, a protection ritual she'd made up but believed in. As dusk fell, she saw him again, not close, not right at the door, but on the edge of the playground, near the rusted slide, watching, always watching. She waved this time, a small flick of fingers. He didn't wave back, just watched, then turned and walked into the mist. Gone again. Juniper stared at the spot long after he disappeared. Not crazy, she whispered again, tasting the words, and they didn't burn like they used to. She painted again that night, on the walls, on the floors, across her own arms, symbols she didn't name aloud, symbols she had seen in dreams and in the cracks of her mind when things got loud. She hummed, a new song this time. The watcher watches, the silence stays, and in the fog the shape obeys. At midnight, she placed a cup of water and half a peanut butter bar outside the front door, a peace offering. When she woke the next morning, the cup was empty, the bar was gone, and a new item had been left for her, a small notebook. She picked it up with reverence. Inside, a map, hand-drawn. The streets of the town she lived beside, details she didn't know, places marked in red, noise trap, dead pause, and near the edge of the map, one word scrawled 3 times in a circle, red tooth. Juniper blinked, the name burning something inside her. She didn't know why, but she knew. The spiral, the name, the silence. It was all connected. Juniper stood in the center of her chalk circle, hands spread, mind racing. The boy, no, the man, he was not like the others. She knew now he was headed to Red Tooth, and she would follow, not now, not yet. She had to prepare, had to say goodbye to her kingdom, leave it safe, leave it strong, leave it booby-trapped. She spent the day marking paths with red yarn and broken crayons. She sharpened her scissors, packed her bag with exacting precision, 5 crackers, a compass that didn't work, a fork, 3 pencils, and her brother's old hospital ID. By sundown, she stood at the edge of the building looking out. The fog curled like fingers around the bones of the playground. She whispered, "We're coming, Red Tooth." She kissed her crown, set it on the steps, and walked into the mist, barefoot. Juniper followed the map drawn in the silent man's notebook, each step a ritual, each intersection a question. The fog thickened the farther she went from the school, swallowing colors and muting shapes. She talked to herself in rhymes to keep the shadows back. Left is teeth, right is wrong, the road to silence isn't long. She clutched her fork like a dagger. The town was dead. Shops with broken windows, cars overgrown with ivy and rust, bones on sidewalks picked clean, dolls impaled on street signs, warnings, offerings, or both. Juniper passed a half-collapsed pharmacy. Someone had written on the door in lipstick, "Quiet equals safe. Don't echo." She nodded at the message. "Someone's been listening," she murmured. Finally. At the edge of the park, she found a mailbox filled with feathers. She added a button from her coat and kept moving, following the red marks on the map, following the spiral inside her. Night fell without ceremony. Juniper sheltered in a laundromat, setting traps with cans and fishing wire. She lined the floor with chalk, symbols only she understood. She didn't sleep. She counted instead, 1 to 60, back to 13, then started over. The silence pressed harder out here, heavier. At some point, she looked into the broken glass of a vending machine and saw not her own face but her brother's, clear as a photograph. He blinked. She didn't. She reached out and touched the glass. It shattered under her fingers. She didn't bleed. She didn't scream. She just said, "Not now." Wait for Red Tooth. Outside, something moved in the street. She saw its shadow, but not its form. She stayed very still. It passed. Didn't sniff, didn't pause, just floated like fog, then was gone. She was close now. The buildings became sparse. Trees replaced houses. A road sign lay twisted in the weeds. It said, "Red Tooth, 1 mile." She stood there a long time. Something about the name made her ribs ache, made her ears ring. A memory tried to form. A hallway. A scream. Her voice? Or his? She shook it off and moved forward. The trees creaked in the breeze she couldn't feel. She followed a dirt path lined with hanging bones, bird skulls, rabbit jaws, twine, and teeth. Someone had decorated the way, made it sacred. She didn't flinch. She added a lock of her hair to the line, a gift, a warning. She arrived at dawn. Red Tooth wasn't a town. It was a scar. What remained were fragments, burnt-out husks of buildings, roads cracked, and bleeding weeds. A stone archway had collapsed over what once may have been a school or church. There were names etched in the ground, scratched like graves, none of them hers. But one caught her breath. Mercer. She crouched beside it, traced it with her finger, then stared into the ruin. The wind picked up, and for the first time in weeks, she heard a voice. Not inside her head, a real one from deep in the ruins, calling. She didn't run, didn't hide. She stepped over the stone and into the ruin. The voice grew louder, but not with words, with pressure, like a heartbeat in her ears, like someone else's thoughts pushing into hers. She saw movement ahead, not a monster, not yet, a man, pale, silent, familiar. Elias, though she didn't know his name. She stopped, watching him from behind a broken wall. He crouched beside a trail of burned paper, hands trembling. Juniper smiled, whispered to herself, "There you are, quiet one," then slipped back into the shadows, unseen. She would watch, for now, but soon she would speak.